Isolation and loneliness. If you are a solopreneur, solo founder, you run your own business, these two words have probably been your companion at some point. Sadly, isolation and loneliness kills your productivity, your drive, and stop you from making the crucial decisions that can take your business to the next level. If this resonates with you right now, don't worry, you are not alone. I've been there many times than I can count. But let me ask you a question. What if you took the professional sportsperson's approach in your life and work, mentally and physically, turning yourself to be the absolute best? The goal in elite sport is to be the absolute best, leaving no stone unturned. Nothing is left to chance. The body has to be at its physical peak. The head has to be in the right space, and no distraction is allowed to get in the way of this goal. This is an extract from a book called Mental Wealth, Unlock Your Potential and Reach Your Life. What is mental wealth and how this principle can reduce your feeling of loneliness as you are chasing your dreams and building your startup? Welcome to the Mary Poppins of Startups live show. I'm Naili Makangu from Athena Leaders, an organization that is passionate about helping you deliver on your goals, your products, your projects, whilst leaving behind the legacy of a happy and productive workplace playground. Today, I'm excited to having a really interesting conversation with Mike Pagan, serial entrepreneur and author of the book Mental Wealth, Unlock Your Potential and Reach Your Life. For those who are new to the show, do remember that we love answering your questions, and whenever you have any thought to share, do put it on the chat. If you're watching in replay, no problems. We'll track down Mike for you. If you have other questions, use hashtag Athena Leaders. Mike, welcome to the show. For those who don't know, Mike is an expert in helping clients achieve positive mental wealth through building handpicked support networks and helping them unlock significant performance improvements. His expertise includes working with entrepreneurial small businesses through to corporate board members and professional sports people, domestically and internationally. And in my own personal book, Mike is also an extremely interesting individual because he gets up to a lot of crazy other stuff outside of work, which hopefully we will talk about today. So, Mike, what is mental wealth?
Well, thank you for having me along. And yeah, let's kick it off. Okay, mental wealth. The first thing I always say when I'm asked this question is that focus has to be on you, the individual. So I am not a mental health expert. I'm not a trained counselor. My focus on mental wealth is building the support network that is fit for purpose around you for the way ahead. Yeah, so it's not about what you used to do, what you used to be. This is throughout our lives, we consistently transition and we consistently develop. And that means we need to consistently evolve. And that with that in mind, let's get the right people supporting us so that we can make bigger, braver decisions, bounce back more effectively when things go wrong, rather than trying to do it all in isolation, because that sucks.
Yeah. You talked about finding the right people as life evolves. And in fact, even in your book, you do mention this idea of people that you meet come in your life for a season and eventually they walk away. So as you are transitioning, you are going to new worlds. How do you find the people that needs to be around you as you are evolving in your journey?
Well, it's a constant search is the honest answer, because we have different people that were great 2 years ago, but are not fit for purpose for the way forward tomorrow. So at the moment, on the global business world, we are stepping away from COVID and the effects that's happened there. Now, the world has changed dramatically. And I don't want to time date everything we're talking about today, because this conversation can be listened to again and again in the future. The reality check is people that were in your corner, they were in your inner sanctum, your inner team 2 years ago. Are they the ones that are asking the right questions for the way the world is today for you now? The amount of people that during lockdowns have taken time out to reflect, to adjust, to consider, am I doing the right thing? Am I excited by the work I'm doing? Do I like the environment I'm in? Heaven forbid, some have decided they didn't like the family life that they were in, and there's been separations and all sorts. People have changed. Yeah. And as a result of that, that means we need to now go and look for the right people to support you going forward. And if we get those people in, then they will ask better questions of us than we can ask of ourselves. They will challenge us more effectively than we can. And if somebody's, more often than not, somebody asks a question that we already know the answer to, but a lot of the time we either don't want to hear the answer, don't want to see the answer, or are so ashamed of the fact that we've known that answer for the last 7 years and have done nothing with it. It's not just me.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes it can be difficult to face yourself in the mirror and, kind of confront yourself. But sometimes I also worry, when you talk about going out there and find people, you will find all sorts of people, right? So before we even start looking at this idea of mental health team and who should be in your team, let's talk about evaluating who do we have at the moment. I find that as an entrepreneur, and many out there might have similar experiences, sometimes when you try to confide to a friend, especially during COVID and my business was taking such a hit, and I was dealing myself with the isolation and the sadness and the loneliness that we're talking about, many people will tell you, oh, but just stop, just stop and move forward. So in your book, you talk a little bit about mood hoovers, right? So how can we identify that, and how can we deal with those kind of situations when most of the people around you wants to support you, they love you, they really want to protect you, but usually by taking you away from your dream rather than actually pushing you forward to your dream?
Well, this is the reason why it's so important to have the right people around you, because one of the negative effects of isolation is isolation kills creativity and prevents decision making. And as a result of that, that can then have a detrimental effect on our performance, our procrastination, and in turn hit our mental health. And part of the reality check is we are all on a mental health spectrum, every single person. It's and it depends on how we wake up from one day to the next as to where we sit. And if we've got good people around us, then they help, they boost. And when things are going wrong, then you've got other people you can turn to. And sadly, when I was writing the book, I lost a friend. He went through a very ugly divorce, estranged from his son, plus COVID, an intelligent man, but he took his own life. And I don't tell you that story for sympathy and so on. It's just a reality, because unfortunately, too many of us have similar stories to that in our friendship groups, in our extended groups around. And just the right person asking the right question at the right time of that individual can change the output, can change what goes on. So we need to understand right from the off who are the people who have actually got our back and are truly committed. So this takes a little bit of time. So for those of you watching, be that now or on record back, get a piece of paper and just start writing down the names of the people in your support network, the people that you know well, you chat to, whatever else, and just start creating that list. Who's in your support network? And I'll talk for a second before I explain what we do next. This is not a scientific approach. It's not academic. It's subjective. So I know my wife would have the dentist on that list, because no matter what happens, if ever he goes on holiday, she gets toothache about 36 hours after he's left the country, that sort of thing. I don't think she's having an affair with him or anything like that. It's just it's constant. And so in her support network, there's that. And so you create this list of all the people who've got there. Now we give them a score of 1 to 10, 1 being a low score, 10 being a high score. It's no more subjective than that. Please don't overinflate somebody's score because you think, oh, she or he might be offended if they ever find out. Nobody's going to find out. This is just for you. Yeah, this is about you looking after you, being selfish about what you need to do. And you just score them. And you might start off with 5, 10, 15 people, whatever the number is for you. And you score those accordingly. Now, the translation of those scores, for simplicity, if you've scored somebody 1 to 3, they know you. They're an acquaintance. Period. Full stop. That's it. Yeah, you know them, but from that they've got your name, the school gate. You clicked, accepted their friend request on LinkedIn or whatever it was. If they're scoring a 4 or a 5, they know you because of a reason. So you might play sport together, you might be at the school gate together. There's something like there's a reason. However, if you don't turn up for 2 months, they won't pick up the phone. So 2 months later, you turn up again, and oh, where have you been, Mike? Oh, I broke my leg. Didn't you know? No. They know you as a reason, but they're not close. Then you've got your 6s and 7s. These are the people. Some of them can be your best friends. They can be your family. They can be all sorts of people. And you go to birthdays, bar mitzvahs, parties, whatever it is with them. However, the one thing you're not comfortable doing with them is sharing your vulnerability, your financial plans, your career aspirations, your personal goals, etc., etc. Those are the ones that score 8, 9s, and 10s. Those are the ones where you are truly comfortable with to share your information. And one of the reflections that happens is people realize that, oh, okay, I don't have many 8, 9s, and 10s. I've got lots of noise, the 4s to the 7s, but I haven't got many of the 8, 9s, and 10s. And that's okay. Because this is what we're doing here is this creates a bit of a baseline, and it's knowing who has truly got your back. We can all come up with entrepreneurial gurus who would be great to be great friends with, and you bumped into them once in a lift, but they're 1 out of 10 commitment to you. There's nothing from them. They're just a nice name to be vaguely associated with, maybe manana one day. So this is about really focusing in on your 8, 9s, and 10s. And when I did a talk like this, the once, a particular lady turned around to me afterwards, and her response was, on the 8, 9s, and 10s, she said, I've got nobody there. I spend my whole life helping people all over the place, going out there, chasing, supporting, working, everything else. But the people who've got my back, there's nobody. And that was a real light bulb reality check for her, that I'm an 8, 9s, and 10s. There's nobody there. So I've got to go and recruit people that will have my back and will ask me better questions rather than me just giving all the time. And it's a very powerful starting point. But once we know, right, there's our baseline. That's your mental wealth team scorecard, as I call it. You've got that set in place. Now we can start looking at other ways to, right, how do we recruit and how do we work with that? Sorry, I realized there was several minutes worth of me talking there, but it just takes you through that scorecarding process so you understand it and then go away and act on that.
Yeah, and I absolutely love what you've just shared with us, because I think it's very, very practical. And a lot of people that are listening right now are probably already thinking about where they will put and rank people in those different categories. Just to be very clear, I love when you talk about the dentist and your wife included dentist on the list, right? So if you are an entrepreneur, what kind of people that we should think about adding on our list? Because of course, when it comes to, partners, friends, and things like that, they come naturally to us. And again, going back to what you mentioned in the book about the analogy about being a sports person, when you look at the sport person and you look at their mental wealth team, they have absolutely everybody from, people who do give them massages, the different coaches, the nutritionists, and so on. So for us in our personal lives, especially those who might struggle to think a little bit outside of the box of the people they see, and start thinking about the people that probably should bring within the 7 or 8 to 10, what kind of people could we consider bringing there?
There's a whole selection of people, and I talk about 4 different core areas, which I can go through. You mentioned the sports people there. The key part there, because I had the privilege of working with a number of elite sportsmen and women as they transition to their life after sport. And for them, it's a very, very brutal transition, because yesterday you had 35 people keeping you on the pitch, in the pool, on the court, wherever it is that your sport is done. The guillotine comes down, and those 35 people are no longer fit for purpose for your future. And they're also no longer paid for by anybody else. So you suddenly are now, okay, who's got my back? And how does that work? Now, the reason why I keep saying that we transition throughout our lives is because when you come out of school and then you start at university, or your first job in an apprenticeship or whatever it is, you transition. When you buy your first property or move out of home, you transition. when you're moving into the next property, you buy your first car, and this scaling of just things as responsibilities increase, we are constantly transitioning. And so it's finding those areas where, okay, we want to evolve around that. And the first space I will always talk on is self-care. And this is something that there's mental health awareness weeks nowadays. There's all sorts of areas to focus on here. But when it comes to self-care, I've always joked that in my family, I'm number 6 because I've got a wife, 3 children and a dog. And last Christmas, we had 8 puppies as well. But that's another story. So I was number 15. But it's the reality check is, though, you have to be number 1. Because if you're not number 1, when something goes wrong elsewhere, you cannot fix or help or support because you're not strong enough. You're not built there. So we have to be selfish, and selfish is good. When you're a child, you're told stop being selfish because you won't share your toys with your friend at school or whatever it is, or your brother or sister. But the reality is we need to be selfish. So we're looking after ourselves mentally, physically, nutritionally, everything like that. And if we need help, then that's people that come into our self-care team. It's understanding about our nutrition. It's understanding about our ways we do exercise. Meditation and mindfulness are 2 things that I have always said I can't do. I'm just rubbish at it because I either can't sit still or I fall asleep, which doesn't really work. But actually, through the challenges I do and other things like that, I've learned that I've done active mindfulness for years, where you're doing repetitive activity over and over again. And that your brain just switches off. You get into the rhythm of the activity. For me, open water swimming. And so you stroke after stroke after stroke. Every time I get out of the water, I feel fresh from the temperature because it's outdoor rather than in a pool. I feel ecstatic in my brain because my brain has been free to get into flow, to get into creativity or whatever. And suddenly you're there, you're fresh, you're awake, you're inspired. And that is just so powerful. It really does make a difference.
But, as you said before on this idea of being selfish and, self-care, it's really, really hard for people who, as you said as well, we are conditioned to believe that putting other people first is the right thing to do throughout our entire lives. And of course, it's easy to think, yes, I have to put myself first. But if it's something that you've never done before, you are an entrepreneur or, you're a parent and you, like you say, you have the kids, you have a business to run, you have team members, and someone tells you this, yes, you have to put yourself first and care about yourself whenever you see that the time that you have in your day is limited. You can barely do what's on your to-do list, let alone thinking about what do I need. And then the second point with that, and this is something that I've experienced on and off, and also I do work with when I do my startup advisory. Sometimes after working so many long hours for my business, of my clients as well, the idea of sitting down and thinking about what is it that I need right now, just that question can be draining on itself. And you postpone that and you go with the motion because it's easier to go with the motions rather than actually sitting down and thinking about, hold on a minute, I need self-care. And as this month is really about, May is the month about the awareness and mental health. How can you help people who know that they need to take the time, they need to ask themselves these questions, but they just can't see the woods for the trees?
Okay, the answer to the first part there is the extreme version of the selfishness is better known as narcissism nowadays. And it always has been, but it's sort of that word is getting a lot of publicity, especially when we see certain political leaders around the world who seem to have rather a large amount of that. But we're not turning this into a political debate. But that is the extreme version of being selfish is narcissism. That you look at some of the very, very successful entrepreneurs in the world who've grown massive businesses, but look at their family status. Second divorce, third divorce, whatever else, family don't talk to them and so on. So there are sacrifices, and it's knowing where you're comfortable and what you're willing to go to. And obviously we are talking the spectrums here. So there's extreme versions, versus people that are applied and they're working. So I'm not saying if you're going to be a successful, brilliant entrepreneur, you're going to lose your family. That's not my point. It's just knowing that just by that whole focus of being slightly selfish in our approach to looking after number one first, and that means you being number one, we can achieve better things and we can work with that. And so then the second part of your question was then focused on, well, where is your sanctuary? And this is, so if we're working long hours, we're putting in the time, energy, and effort. But there are times where we are being less productive, but we're just sitting in the office anyway. We're being present because we think we need to be. That's where you've got to be disciplined to call the time out and go for a walk, go for a swim, go for sit on top of a mountain and yodel, or just go and do some gardening, whatever it is for you. And it's taking that time to your sanctuary. For me, locally, there's a lovely coffee shop I go to where I can just sit in the corner, put in a podcast, put in an audio book, or actually read a physical thing. But then you're just sitting, chilling, enjoying, switching off. And that sanctuary space is knowing where they are for you and going to them. I know Easter Monday just gone. We live in Warwickshire in the middle of England. So to get to the coast is approximately 2 hours, a minimum of 2 hours to get there. We drove down first thing in the morning at approximately 6 o'clock, pulled into the beach areas at 8:45 in the morning, had breakfast, swimming in the sea, walking along the beaches, etc. Whole day, left 8 o'clock that evening, dropped my middle daughter back at university on the way home, back home by 10:30. I loved it. My wife loved it. Daughter loved it. The dog loved it. Totally refreshed, totally rebooted. And it just that boost. And we've got to find ways to take time out to enjoy and reflect. And I know I'm sensing the next question will be, yeah, but none of us have any time, do we? We're entrepreneurs.
In fact, even just that, if we expand that beyond just entrepreneurs and even people in the office, there's actually a nice comment that came in. We're going to put on the screen, a comment from Lucy Kreiner, and she says, I understand that self-care is important, but I wouldn't know how to address that with my boss to receive support during the day or managing deadlines. I really needed to hear this conversation today. So thanks, Excellent. Lucy, for your comments. So if you pick up on that, Mike, how would you answer that, or even kind of suggest things not beyond just the entrepreneurships as well for other people who are listening?
Well, this is where the world has changed into this sort of hybrid working environment where we're at office, we're not in the office, we're remote, everything else going on nowadays, and people are being judged by their performance rather than by micromanaged by sitting over your shoulder, making sure you're sitting there. Now, obviously, different jobs have different roles as to whether you have to be physically there between standard working hours and everything else. But it's knowing what our time is and how effective we are. There's an age-old illness that the business schools talk about called presenteeism. And that goes back in the day of good old corporate life where it was whose car is in the car park longest. Because you have to turn up at work before the boss and then leave after the boss has left. So that means you could be turning up at 8 in the morning and leaving at 7 at night. But actually, you're only productive from 4 o'clock in the afternoon onwards because you realize you've done not a lot the previous 7 or 8 hours. And now you're trying to get into it. And it's knowing where your times of productivity work for you. Especially, again, going back to the lockdown times, some people are good in the morning. Some people are not. Some people are great at 10:30 at night. Others are fast asleep. So we have these working patterns to know what works for you. And it's understanding that we don't have to sit there in front of the computer doing the stuff all of the time. But we also, to flip that, we also need to be really aware of the self-sabotage habits we have that use up our time, energy, and effort that just hemorrhage. And I'll use one which will push some buttons for some, but if it doesn't push buttons for you, translate it to an activity that you do that's similar. So the example I will always use is alcohol, because I used to be a fairly serious rugby player, and that involved on and off the pitch. So for a long time, alcohol drinking was part of socializing, part of creativity, of having fun. But thinking on a Friday afternoon, sort of you're there at sort of 5 o'clock thinking it's got to be 6 o'clock somewhere. I want to have my first beer. I want to have my first glass of wine. Oh, I'm going to be European today and take it forward an hour. So suddenly, yeah, so you have a few drinks on a Friday night. Then a Saturday lunchtime, have a couple before watching some sport or whatever activities you're doing. And then the Saturday evening, have a few more and carry on. Then into the Sunday. That's selfish Sunday. That's where you have the alcohol or the wine on the Sunday lunchtime that you don't want to share with anybody else. You know, the posh stuff you've been given or that you bought. And then you finish it in the evening, or you open a second version of it because you carry on. Then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, you only have one night on the drinking on those because you're looking after your body, and your body's a temple and everything else, so you don't want to. Now, simply putting some basic maths around that. Friday night, that's 3 to 4 hours. Saturday, 4 to 6 hours. Sunday, 2 to 4 or even 5 hours. Monday to Thursday, another 3 to 4 hours. Easily, we can calculate up to 15 hours of time we donate to the god of alcohol on a weekly basis.
I love that. I love that.
And that excludes hangovers.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying here that all drinking is bad, because the counter argument is always, yeah, but Mike, we do sociable as well.
But so actually, just before you go on with that, I just wanted to also share different gods that we might not be aware of, or maybe that we do without, knowing. Alcohol is one of them. But my favorite one, I mean, my own, is the god of Netflix. When a show becomes 2 shows, becomes 3 and 4, and before you know it. And one of the way I can tell my own mental health, for my own mental health actually, is when I look at how much time I spent on Netflix, I can tell whether I'm already, which level of being down or depressed I am as the amount of Netflix grows. And usually those are things I don't even want to watch anyway. So I think now that everything is so digital, we talk about alcohol, Netflix, we talk about, alcohol, being on your Instagram all day and, Instagram, all those kind of Facebook, things.
Yeah. It's the screen time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so 15 hours a week donated to any one of those distraction gods is 2 working days a week.
But when we take that to work,
2 working days a week is 100 days a year. 100 days a year, and I've got no time, I'm too busy, but I'm giving 100 days a year to Netflix, or I'm giving 100 days a year to red wine, or it's not about stopping those. It's understanding the volume of self-sabotage that we create because I'm too stressed, I'm too wound up, whatever else, because, well, actually there's time that we can spend more effectively. And I don't want people to work longer hours. Categorically, I don't want people to work longer hours. I want you to be more effective in the time that you're there, and then go and have some fun.
Yes.
Go and do activities. Go walking. Go play golf. Go swim. Go whatever it is. Take up some cooking classes. Do stuff that's good for you, that just feeds your soul, so that you are then happy, hungry, and productive when you're in the place, knowing full well, okay, I'm happy to have Netflix, but I'm never going to watch more than 2 episodes in a row.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, suddenly that might, that statement alone for one listener has potentially saved them 42 working days a year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Because in fact, this at the end of the month, I'm giving a workshop on face-to-face, first time in for a really long time. It's actually going to be in a town called Valencia in Spain. And it's for a remote team. They are fully remote, and they will continue being fully remote. But one thing that they've noticed, as we talked throughout this podcast, this show today, is that because of the pandemic and having to stay at home, a lot of people have developed this habit of working long hours, and they struggle with creating the habits and the discipline to stop when they have to stop. And more importantly, I think that there is also a struggle in terms of understanding how you can actually procrastinate while thinking that you're being productive at work. You do way too much, or you over polish your work. You don't understand 80-20 rules or how to be productive. And also you cannot say no, which is actually one of the biggest challenges that people have at work when it comes to creating the boundaries of their time. So for people who are struggling with that, how can they start creating new habits so that they can kind of give themselves the permission to take the time to look after themselves?
Okay. The simple process here is about making yourself accountable to other people. So two of the other areas I talk about is having a coach and also the peer support groups or mastermind groups. So I've had a coach for years in the sporting environment. A coach will help you achieve more as a result of them seeing things that you do differently. So one of the crazy activities I did a few years ago was when we swam the English Channel. We did a relay swim. And I was coached just a couple of times to look at the efficiency and effectiveness of my swimming stroke. And as a result of this coaching, I improved dramatically. I've been swimming since the age of 5. I'm not a particularly fast swimmer. I've got a good battery, but I'm not overly fast. And it's just, wow, I wasn't expecting that sort of contrast. But that was a different set of eyes looking at me to understand what I was doing. Okay, so now I have a coach in my work. And he's a psychologist as well as a business coach. So he actually knows I'm lying before I've opened my mouth. Because he's reading my body language. He goes, you're trying to kid me again here, aren't you? So that coaching process, and I mean, that's part of my working world, and I know it's what you do as well. It's that coaching process is so important because they will hold you accountable and spot the things that you do. And because you're professionally engaged with them, they will hold you account and challenge you because that's their job. They're not there to be your best friend. They're there to make sure that you can step up. And then the other area is the focus on the mastermind group. Now, for those who don't understand or don't know masterminding, if you think of whether you're a solopreneur or you're a chief exec of a multi-million-dollar business with thousands of employees, at the top of your business, you don't tell the bank or you don't tell a stakeholder that you don't know the answer. Your co-directors, you'll never actually be honest with them and tell them you're not sure what to do next. Your wife or husband hasn't got a clue what you do, but supports you anyway. Your employees, again, you're not going to tell your employees you're not sure what to do next because that would be sabotaging your progress and everything in the future, or they'd lose faith. And your friends in the sports or in the school environment, whatever else, they will always say, just go for it, Mike, because you always land on your feet. So because they don't understand either. So where do you go for independent, confidential, impartial, brutal, loving advice? And that's what masterminding is. And it stems from the 1760s in Birmingham in the UK, where the original Lunar Society was created with some brilliant minds. And it was all about sitting around a table, one person talking about their challenges, issues, and opportunities, and the other minds are then critiquing, observing, coming up with different solutions, coming up with ways of playing. And then that hot seat position changes. And so you've got brilliant minds challenging you as to the way you're going, what you're doing. And then at the end of your session, there'll be 2 or 3 actions that you commit to doing before the next meeting, before the next session. And believe me, you do them. Even if it's at 2 o'clock in the morning before the next meeting, you do them because then you get the momentum and that builds because then that respects the process. Everybody learns, everybody gains, which means it's so powerful. And if you've got half a dozen people in there, you've got a number of new people in your self-care team, you've got your coach, then the only final area you need is your professional network. And that's accountants, solicitors, and wealth management. And these are the ones who are external to your normal thinking process because they look at things devoid of emotion. Yeah, they ask those ugly questions when you're thinking, oh, this would be a great idea. And they say, would it?
Really?
And that builds this whole support network around you that really does change your game because they're there. They're not all on speed dial. on your phone, because that's the other thing. We can make phone calls, but they are there and they're getting you accountable. They're asking better questions than you do of yourself.
And I believe that one thing I love about the concept of mastermind as well, it helps elevate you and push you in directions where you know you have to go, but you either don't know how or you're too scared. Yeah. Because obviously they will ask you the questions that, you know, in the background, it says, maybe I can't. I mean, really, you can't do this? Or why are you doing this? And that can help you move forward.
And that comes back to the cantras, that little voice in your head. You mentioned the phrase mood hoovers earlier. These are those negative people who, no matter how brilliant you are, what you've achieved, what's so great, they will always just have to throw dirt at what you're doing. They don't boost you. They don't lift you. They just suck the positivity out of the room when they arrive. We know who they are. And there'll be some of them, you know, through your activities, through your work colleagues, hopefully not too many, or even worse still, potentially part of your family. And you have to, while some of these mood hoovers we can't always get away from, we just need to manage them more effectively. We need to manage those so that they are not poisoning your performance. They're not holding you back. And that gives you scope to achieve so much more. It's a fun, silly phrase, mood hoovers. It's not mine. It's public language. I mean, some people call them energy vampires or drains and radiators. And there's so many. But just talking about mood hoovers, the majority of people watching you've just visualized somebody that absolutely, yeah, he does that. Yeah. Okay, let's give him a wide berth. Don't seek out their presence. And I'm not saying that old dangerous one where you sort of see them ringing and you hang up, because a number of stories you hear of people, I saw the phone ringing and you hung up, but I was the other side of the road. I was watching you as you hung up.
Ouch. You've been found out. And one thing I wanted to also pick up on in this conversation is to dive a bit more into your life, because obviously we jumped straight into mental wealth, but we didn't really explore the two aspects of you, and the entrepreneurship aspect, what you've done, your business life, and also your personal life. The reason why I wanted to bring that at this moment as part of this idea of mental wealth is that, you know, by having a mental wealth team, you're actually creating an environment and a life that I call a playground, right? You're living your life on your own terms. And that's something that ever since I started working, it's been something that I've made myself accountable. So before, Mike, you get into it and you start sharing with us a little bit of yourself professionally and on the other side, I want to challenge the listeners right now. Can you think of a time where you've decided to do something that helps you live life on your own terms, even if it means going against the flow? So Mike already talked about swimming the channels, and he will talk a little bit more about what he's done. I'm going to share some myself as well. And it would be lovely if you want to share in the chat, or at least keep that in your mind, because this is going to be really important in terms of improving your life. So this is a challenge for the listeners. Again, whether it's live or not, really do think about that question. When was the last time, or what's the last thing that you've done that meant that you lived life within your own terms? So back to Mike. Can you please share with us a little bit on your professional and also on your personal life, so that people can have a really full picture of who you are and why, you know, everything that you are saying to us is really important, as it's something that you've actually done yourself as well.
It's the story I'll give you here. This is there are life-changing moments that we've all had, and I used to work in the corporate world. So I was sales, marketing, management. I was in finance and hotels, and I made a decision I wanted to live and work overseas for a number of years, originally based UK, and I was moving out to Australia, and with my wife and my one-year-old daughter in those days, and we were heading overseas. And the reason why I tell you this story is because my father, back in the 1950s and early 1960s, used to live in Singapore as a bachelor, and he partied quite hard, shall we say. He was involved in the cricket club, doing whatever else. And one of his best friends was there, then moved up to Bangkok and set up a container business, logistics, and they stayed in touch over the years. And this is before the internet, so it wasn't easy to stay in touch. They basically swapped Christmas cards once a year. In 1999, my father sent his friend in Bangkok this card, said I was moving out to Australia, to which this gentleman rang my dad. They didn't speak on the phone. It was purely a pen pal friendship by this stage, unless they happened to be in each other's country. And he said, you really should tell Mike to contact my mate Newton in Perth in Australia when he gets there. We did some land deals in the 1970s. He's a great guy. If he can help, I'm sure he'll look after Mike when he gets there. So needless to say, Mike turning up in Australia with a wife and a baby and a rucksack, to spend a little bit of time getting to know the family again, because I've been doing the corporate hours. And then I went to see this chap, Newton, and he answered the door, and I walked in and he said, come on in, mate. Feeling a bit crook today. Just had my first dose of chemo, but come on in. Let's see what we can do for you now you're over here. Long story short, he was considering investing in a new .com business. And instead of him investing, he plugged me in there because I took commercial skills into the company. And as a result of me joining that company, they were real estate online. So a bit like Zoopla and Fish for Sale in Australia. And I took commercial skills in there. When I moved back to the UK 3 years later, I still had all the shares in there. They bought me out a few years after that. But I did some study whilst I was in Australia. And then when I came back to the UK, I set up my business, which has been going 20 years now. The reason why I tell you this story is because Newton died 3 months after I first met him. So I had this window of opportunity, literally a minuscule moment in time, to meet this chap, all because my father used to go drinking with another guy in the 1950s in Singapore. And Newton, whether he knows it or not, and I doubt it because he passed, changed my life totally. And it's that knowing who those moments in time, it's knowing your network and asking those questions. And we have to seize the day. I know there's many stories about carpe diem and stepping up and everything else. But if we actually act upon those networks, if the gut feel is I could or I should, then let's go for it. Make those changes. If there's somebody else you need help, asking for help is not a sign of weakness. Asking for help is because I'm brilliant at this, but I don't know how to do that. I mean, that whole time when somebody becomes self-employed for the first time and the computer stops working or the printer stops working, and there used to be a department that did that. Now you are the department. you are HR. You are whatever else. And if you're in a startup environment, you've got to fix it all. So you've got to ask for help. You've got to find those people around you who are going to do that. And some will be very generous. Some you have to pay for. Some you can do all sorts of other creative deals with. But you have to actually, in the startup world, become very resilient at asking for help, because you do not know all the answers. Yeah. And the more you think you do, the harder it becomes.
Oh, yeah, you can say that again. I guess this is summarized nicely what my life has been ever since I launched my company. I really learned what it meant to ask for help. And in fact, when it comes as well to this question, living your life to, my own terms, what was always very important for me was that I'm going to work as hard as I can to grow my business, live my passion, in the tech world, the startup world. But I will also want Naili to remain Naili, and whatever that is. And ever since I was young, I've always been crazy in terms of sports and doing random things like bungee jumping, having a tennis coach and things like that. So my challenge at the moment is actually to master Spanish. It's not about being fluent in Spanish. I think I'm kind of there. But, I wanted to master Spanish just because it's part of random things I wanted to do. So when I started up my company, I decided to be remote and to live in Cambridge and Madrid at the same time. So a few months here, a few months there, so that I can bring together my desire of goals of the different parts of me, so that I can, just be happy with myself. It's about creating my own playground. I'm not going to lie, it comes at a price, but it's a price that I chose to pay to kind of be where I am today.
But how rewarding has that decision been? How fulfilling is your life? And that switch between restaurant Spanish, two beers, please, versus business Spanish is a quantum leap. But you'll get there, and it's persevering.
Exactly.
It's back to that cumulative effect of doing things, repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, and go again.
Exactly. Brilliant. You know, the other day I was at the theater watching a play in Spanish, right? There's no subtitles. You either get it or you don't. So you have to listen. And, you know, those are the small moments where I think, yes, it's worth it. And then in the evening, I had to work a little bit late because I had a startup session and a work session with the client the next day. And I think, you know, it's all about it's all about really being in that moment and creating the team that supports me to reduce my loneliness, my isolation, and to really go through with everything that I'm doing at the moment. In fact, I've got, as we're getting towards the close, I've got one more question for you. But first, just the last message that I'm going to read out from the chat. It's just a thank you from Celestin Makangu. Hello, I would like to say thank you to both of you for the interesting show. Thanks for also all of the comments that we've had today.
Thanks for being there, Celestine.
Yeah.
English channel, say what? Yeah.
Exactly.
It's one of those things that sort of we all find different challenges that work for us. And we talked about it, the guys I would swim with. None of us had got open water experience, and it was just, wouldn't it be great to have? And then suddenly we did, and we raised a lot of money for charity and did all sorts. And it was more people have climbed Everest than have swum the English Channel. So I have bragging rights for life. Yeah,
that's for sure. This is one of the reasons when you've mentioned that, I'm like, oh, Mike is coming on my show. A lot of people need to know about that. Absolutely. So before we go, Mike, I'm sure that there's a lot of people, your website is, we will share that in the show notes, and they can go and find out more about this idea of, mental wealth team and masterminds. But I thought it would be good for you to share with us some kind of parting nuggets that people can just take with them as they are going to continue about with their days.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Okay, there's two things I want to leave you with. Firstly, is let's reflect back on that mental wealth team scorecard I shared with you. Go away, spend some time in it, really put some time in it. Please don't be subjective about what you do and try and make scores look better or worse than they are. Just go with it. It's not for sharing with others. It's just for you. Because as a result of recruiting a positive, proactive mental wealth team, you can have more fun. You can be braver in your decisions that you make. And should things go wrong at different points, you've got a team around you who will support you, and you'll bounce back more effectively. And that's one of the massive benefits of having this whole change of focus, of having the right people around you asking better questions. I've made so many errors in times when I haven't had good people around me. So it really does change that up. And the second one, and this is very much about being positive human beings. And it's during the lockdowns and everything else, the focus here is on what the difference makes when we pick up the phone and make the call. A long story short, my youngest son is just in his A-level years now, and he fortunately had a friend who was unsuccessful in a suicide attempt last year. When this happened, the morning afterwards, I got a phone call from one of my best mates who lives in America, and rang me at 11 o'clock in the morning and just sort of started to say, how you going? And now I talk to him 2 or 3 times a year. And I said, I want to say, pause for a minute here, Bok. Why have you rung me today? Why specifically this day? And he couldn't answer the question. He just said, I just felt like it. He was ringing at 5 o'clock in the morning, US time, on his way home from work. He's the head of A&E at a hospital in Pennsylvania. So he knows, he's a doctor, so he knows everything. I was able to talk to him about all the issues that were going on with this young man, what he'd done, what he'd taken, how it had worked. And I was then able to inform this young man's parents what was going on and everything else. It was one of the most productive, incredible phone calls as far as knowledge and sanity and everything else that I could ever receive. And I thanked him wholeheartedly for that. That's where my challenge for you is now. If you've got a gut feel that's saying, I haven't spoken to or I haven't heard from somebody, for whatever reason or for whatever period of time, pick up the phone. Do not tweet them. Do not text them. Do not social media fist pump them, thumbs up, like them, whatever it is. Pick up the phone. If you live local, pop round and say hello. You do not know what is going on in somebody else's world. We know one slither of the pie of what they're doing. The rest of it, we can't see and we don't understand. It may well be, and then 99% of the time, it will be nothing. But just by asking that question, reaching out and being there, potentially we can change people's lives and going further, even save a life. And that's by being positive human beings and just asking better questions. My challenge for you today, though, is build your mental wealth team. Get the right people around you. Contact me if you want to talk to me through LinkedIn, or you've got all the links and everything else. More than happy to see what can be uncovered. But we can achieve so much more with the right people around us. And that is not just making more money. That's about having more fun, having a good party along the way, and doing stuff that makes us completely random and stupid. But that's not a bad thing. It makes us different and fun.
Wow, Mike, that was such a powerful statement. And yeah, wholeheartedly pick up the phone and do support each other out there. For anyone who wants to find out Mike, you know where it is. Thanks, Mike, for being such a wonderful guest to the show. It's been a pleasure for me, not just reading your book, but having the opportunity to discuss the book with you and also with our audience. Anyone else out there are thinking about so many of all the advice that Mike has shared today, we are going to have them in our show notes. At the same time, I will highly recommend that you get the book. It's a very easy read, but a very powerful read as well, especially if you do put that in practice, as I have done myself as well. Thank you to everybody else. And do remember, let's design a happy and productive workplace playground together.